Conservative activist Charlie Kirk died yesterday after being shot while speaking on stage at an event at Utah Valley University. The 31-year-old hosted a popular podcast, was a staunch ally of President Trump, and as a teenager in 2012, founded Turning Point USA, a conservative youth organization now active at over 3,500 college campuses. The assassination was the latest in a recent wave of political violence and was condemned by lawmakers from both parties. An initial suspect in the shooting was released from custody last night after being interrogated by law enforcement. That's according to FBI Director Kash Patel. Now is the time to chime in. What are your thoughts on the rise of political violence within this country? Call us or text 713-440-8870. Tributes have been paid from across the political spectrum, starting with President Donald Trump, who wrote on social media, "No one understood or had the heart of the youth in the United States of America better than Charlie." President Trump posted, and he also ordered flags to be flown at half-mast through Sunday. Former President Joe Biden called for an end to political violence after the fatal shooting of Kirk. "There is no place in our country for this kind of violence. It must end now," President Biden said in a post on X. "Jill and I are praying for Charlie Kirk's family and loved ones." Also, former President Barack Obama also weighed in on social media, saying, "We don't yet know what motivated the person who shot and killed Charlie Kirk, but this kind of despicable violence has no place in our democracy." Michelle and I will be praying for Charlie's family tonight, especially his wife Erica and their two young children. That was President Obama who wrote on X. Governor Greg Abbott released a statement on the shooting death of right-wing conservative activist Charlie Kirk yesterday as well, calling it a senseless act of violence. Again, now is the time to join us on Hello Houston. What are your thoughts on the rise of political violence in America? You can call or text 713-440-8870.
And as we continue this conversation, I think we can all agree there is no place for this kind of violence in our country. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't happen, regardless of what side of the political aisle you are on. It is wrong. It is reprehensible. And we all have to understand that as this conversation goes. You can already see political lines drawing around this, and you run the risk of forgetting that a human being was murdered, a father, a husband, and that family no longer has him as part of it, regardless of if you agree with or disagree with his political beliefs. This isn't the way we handle things, or shouldn't be the way we handle things in this country.
Even if you disagree with him, he was bringing the conversation and willing to debate those who disagreed with him. And some people aren't willing to do that are out there on the very far right or the very far left. They want to stay in their comfort zone and don't want to discuss anything but what they want to discuss, where as Charlie Kirk was willing to take on anyone. Right. And so I admire that about him. And as Ernie says, it's horribly ironic in so many ways.
And I think we have to be very careful, right, as we are news consumers. When we are opening the internet, things are very heated. And so I implore everybody to take a second and, before we're commenting, because right now when we look at our country, it's a time where we need to find alignment. This, like Ernie was saying, this is extremely tragic. He was a 31-year-old man. He had two young daughters and a wife. He was speaking about his political views on a university campus, shortly after, just a few hours later, there was a shooting that happened in Colorado where 4 students and people were injured. This type of gun violence in America has to be addressed.
Yeah. To just wrap up something that Frank was saying, too, for those of you who aren't familiar with Charlie Kirk, what made him different and stand out was his approach was debate. Whether you agreed with the style in which he did it can be up to discussion, but the fact was he would, as Frank said, take on anyone. That made him stand out from pundits who simply would come on and pontificate their beliefs. He would engage, and he invited people with other points of view to talk with him. He talked with Gavin Newsom. He talked with other folks and had these debates. It made him stand out in a landscape where all too often all you hear is just a talking head talking.
Yep.
So that was an interesting point. We are inviting you to join the conversation. 713-440-8870. Alex from Richmond is on the line. Before we get to Alex, I will remind everyone that we always have respectful conversations here on the show, and also, though, are open to your thoughts and opinions. So, Alex, take us away.
Hiya. Yeah, I wanted to first acknowledge that you guys are looking for respectful opinions. I myself hate the idea that we are living in a world of this kind of normalized violence. It's something I feel very strongly about. But I also, myself, last night had very complicated feelings and reactions to this because, as you guys were kind of discussing, Charlie Kirk was a very controversial figure. He was someone who, I mean, I hate this about myself, but I'm terminally online enough to know this about him. His whole bread and butter was essentially mocking people. He would cut up his content and, spend his time defending various forms of political violence in themselves. And I'm wrestling with that feeling that, no, this was not a good man by any stretch of the imagination, but I am opposed to actually what happened. And I guess I wanted to also kind of put that out there, that maybe it's okay that we're sort of wrestling with this.
Alex,
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
I think that is absolutely right. And I think it's also one of those things where on social media, if you were somebody who, followed him and agreed with him, you will see a lot more of his content. There are a lot of people who didn't know who he was, and now they're seeing a lot more of his content out there. And so it's one of those things where I think as a country, we have to be respectful. These types of things cannot continue to happen.
I don't know if you folks have watched Tallarico talking about this, which I thought he took a very interesting stance, and it kind of falls in line with what Alex is talking about in regards to we have to be able to separate the human being from the rhetoric.
Yeah.
And in what Tallarico was saying is that from his faith system and belief system, he must love all people regardless of their opinions on things. You can have a political disagreement with someone. You can have different points of view on a topic or a subject, but to senselessly murder somebody, you can't find justification in that, but you can find justification in arguing against maybe someone's stance, belief system.
It's not a door that we want to open as a nation, but I'm afraid it's been opened. I mean, President Trump, a person died at the rally where an assassination attempt was made on Trump. And when we all thought this has to stop then, and clearly a year later, something like this happens.
713-440-8870. Nani from Clear Lake is on the line. Nani, I hope I'm saying your name right.
Yeah, you are. You nailed it.
Okay, thank you. What's on your mind today?
Okay. I do not advocate for violence in any form, whether it's fist fighting or murder. But I'm getting a little frustrated with everybody saying that he's a political pundit, that he got killed because he had certain political views. But most of his speech and on YouTube is hate speech. So now being racist is political? Or some of the other things, that empathy, that's personal. That has nothing to do with politics and policy. So what it is. It's horrible. Like, again, I don't advocate for any kind of violence. But stop saying that it was a political murder. One, we don't know why he was killed. And two, it wasn't a political presence. He was, I don't know what the word is for somebody who goes around spewing hate to get people riled up and lied. But he wasn't political.
Nani, thank you very much for your call, 713-440-8870. She also brings up a point that we do need to make sure that we point out is that we do not know yet the motive for the shooting. You can speculate. You know that he was politically engaged. You know that he was speaking at a university. You know that we know that he was the sole target of why the shooter was there. So you can assume it had something to do with a political rhetoric, but we don't know that yet. And we'll learn more.
And Nani's right in that he was not an elected official. So this, but what we do know is that he was at a university. This was a young man at a university speaking his political views, and he was shot. And so that is one of the things that we have to continue to hold space for. And again, I think as a country, we are dealing with some very complex holding space for a lot of feelings. And it's hard because everything has become so political. So much of our culture today has become political. So it is trying to not dehumanize people and look at this as a tragedy. Again, this was a man who had children. Whether you agree with him or not, I don't believe anybody should be murdered for their political views. I also don't think that children should be murdered at their desks. I think this is the third politically motivated shooting since June. We understand that the Minnesota House Democratic Farmer Labor Caucus leader, Melissa Hartman, was killed alongside her husband. Mm-hmm. That same night, Democratic Senator John Hoffman and his wife were also shot in their home. Shortly after the tragedy that there's video of seeing the assassination of Charlie Kirk. There was a shooting in Colorado. I think now is the time to come together as a country and really look at our policy.
Yeah, those do seem more politically motivated.
Correct, because they were elected officials.
I certainly get what Nani is saying. In that, you could say, well, his social views were really what maybe offended someone, or his views of the way he saw how other people that disagreed with him were. So it wasn't necessarily always political, but like you say, everything seems to have become political.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk about,
very hard nowadays.
Well, if you want to talk about LGBTQ, that becomes political.
That
becomes political, but it's really more about how you treat people in a society.
Women's health care becomes political.
And why is that political? It's about women's health care.
My body becomes political.
Right.
I
think it's hard to separate all of that.
I think Nani also brings up a good point that I hope we will explore in the future when we've had some time from this. But to look at the changing rhetoric when it comes to political speech, as you were both just talking about in today's day and age in our country, how we address issues, how we talk about them, how they have vilified certain people, certain groups, how different this is from maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or maybe how similar it is to 60 or 70 years ago. I'd be very curious in seeing the evolution of how we express political concern and challenges and how that has changed over time, and I'm sure we will get to that. Again, 713-440-8870.
We do have a call from Scott from the Galleria. Scott, welcome to Hello Houston. What are your thoughts or comments?
Thank you. I think one of the things that, just as a follow-on from what Nani said and what Frank's been saying, but it's a little bit different take, and that is we talk about gun violence, we talk about political violence, and those are just adjectives. They're adjectives for violence. Mm-hmm. We need to recognize that violence is a part of the American culture, that violence is actually a characteristic of us as Americans. And it doesn't matter whether it's John Wilkes Booth or Sirhan Sirhan or whoever it is. This is not something that's just happened recently, that violence is part of the American culture. And so what can we do, not in our media, not in a general sense, but on a specific person-to-person basis to deal with this change of culture that we need to affect in America? And one of the things I'd like to turn people to is a movement by Tim Shriver called Unite that talks about the way that we talk to other people. And he talks about a spectrum of speech that ranges from between contempt to dignity. And he actually has an index for our own speech, our personal speech, where we can rate ourselves on where we fall on that spectrum. That's
all right. Thank you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had not heard of that, and I think we'll definitely look into that and see what we can do. It seems like the idea of what we're talking about is how to better understand communicating with each other and our own role we play in it.
And to what Scott was saying, he's right. Political violence, gun violence, social violence, religious violence, that they are, at the end of the day, ways to try to understand violence.
And that's the thing, and to that point, I read this article this morning, goodfaithmedia.org, by Sean Palmer, who basically was talking about how America, the article is called Born in Violence, and that connection of violence within America. So that's, again, we appreciate your calls. You can keep those coming, 713-440-8870.
Let's go over to Danny from the Northeast. Danny, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, so I didn't know him super well. What I have come across when I did decide to look him up was very inflammatory statements, most of which I did not agree with. I saw some things that were very inflammatory, some very racist statements that he was making. I guess that's kind of how he made his political statement. But the irony I found, the one statement that I saw where he defended guns, not just defending guns, because I think people have the right to carry guns, but where he specifically defended the idea that people are just going to die, and that's okay. And I thought that was a very ironic statement that he basically said, we're going to have deaths, and that's worth the price of all of us being able to keep guns. And like I said, I have a concealed handgun license, not an issue with guns, but I think the idea that the response to a shooting that some people are just going to die and being very cold, I think it's very ironic that now it seems that he is kind of in the situation himself. So that's my thoughts.
Danny, thank you for calling in and sharing that with us. He brings up a point that I wanted to go back to, something that Celeste and I were talking about earlier. As you go into social media, as you go into the world and look for videos to find things about maybe what he has said or how he presented himself, you are definitely going to come across videos from what happened yesterday. There are edited versions of it out there, but there are also videos that, like what we talked about yesterday with the stabbing in the subway, be careful, because there are videos actually of the impact and the damage that happened to his body, and you can see it, and it is very disturbing. So make sure you are being conscious of how you look for media.
And, Ernie, to that point, not just the videos of the actual act and the violence that is happening, but, we know how much social media plays into our fears and into our affirmations of what we believe. And so I think that what's also you're going to see is people are going to see two very different types of content when they do look up this Charlie Kirk. And that's going to be if, you felt one way about him, the algorithm is going to continue to show those things. And if you felt another way about him, your algorithm is going to continue to show. And at the end of the day, I think we have to remember these are people that are out there. Again, this was tragic. 713-440-8870. We invite you to the conversation. Richard is on the line from Bel Air. Richard, welcome to Hello Houston.
Hello. I've been really concerned about the fact that much of the coverage has been what I'd call sane washing of this guy. As has been mentioned before, much of his rhetoric is racist and anti-Semitic. And he might put it in reasonable terms, having discussion, but he blames the Jews for a lot of things. He says the Civil Rights Act was harmful to America. And even with the most liberal of television stations, they have not mentioned that once. In fact, they fired Matthew, I can't remember his last name offhand right now, for telling the truth of what the last person just said. He basically effectively brought it on himself in the sense of saying that people will die by guns and that's all right. And the sane washing and also the wall-to-wall coverage. When the legislators in Michigan were killed politically, there was maybe half an hour coverage, and that was it. But MSNBC has covered it full time all day yesterday and still today. I don't quite understand it. And y'all are covering it. It's bad that a person got killed, but a lot of people get killed, and they're not covered full time all day.
Richard, thank you for your point of view and for giving us a call at 713-440-8870.
And I just want to clarify, it was MSNBC analyst Matthew Dowd who was fired. And I also want to clarify, it wasn't Michigan, it was Minnesota where those elected officials were shot. Again, we thank all perspectives and for joining the conversation today on Hello Houston. There is a lot to discuss within this topic. Again.